Look at these things. Aren't they adorable? But seriously, why are thousands of adults across the globe lining up, waiting online for hours in queues, refreshing frantically, and paying 5 to 10 times the retail price just to get one of these? Let's talk about the psychology of the Labubu craze. First, Labubu wasn't born in a boardroom. It actually started off as a sketch. In 2015, artist Mr. Cussing Long started off with a doodle of a wide-eyed woodland creature that was part mischievous goblin and part woodland sprite. At first glance, it was quirky, but it was actually psychologically packed with, we'll call them Trojan horses of emotional triggers. Labubu taps into what we call baby schema. Big eyes, a small frame, round, soft features, all of which trick our brains into feeling protective and affectionate over this thing. But beneath this cuteness is something else. That grainy kind of sketchbook style. Does it remind you of anything? To me, these harken back to the kinds of creatures that lived in the margins of some of the bedtime stories I read. You know, the one with the kid wearing a crown yelling at monsters? Yeah, that one. And then, as Labubu shifted from sketches to toys, a whole new force kicked in: scarcity. Once it became more than art, it became a tangible memory you could hold that was incredibly emotionally sticky. Another component that makes these toys such a hit is what we'll call retail roulette, also known as blind boxes. When you get one of these, you never know which figure you're going to get, and there's always one ultra rare variant, so opening one feels less like shopping and more like spinning a pastel colored slot machine. This randomness creates a dopamine loop: chase, reveal, repeat. And then social media supercharged it. Unboxing videos, rarity tier lists, and trade hauls started to flood Instagram and TikTok. It turned collecting into content and content into status right about the time that it reached its tipping point, which is when Blackpink's Lisa chimed in. When a global fashion icon casually flexes her Labubu shelf, you don't just create demand, you validate obsession. But underneath all this, one of the most brilliant things is that Labubu didn't stay niche nor lose its vision. It went high fashion and started collaborating with brands like Vans, Coca-Cola, and even luxury houses. That crossover reframed the item from a collector's toy to a cultural artifact. And on top of this, psychologically, started to cue what we call signaling behavior. In other words, owning Labubu doesn't just mean you're in the know, it means you're in the right know. And then they triggered viral campaigns that were basically a masterclass in how to solidify the hunger for your product. Limited drops, themed releases, social media challenges, all of which engineered scarcity paired with communal spectacle. Everyone's playing, but no one really feels like it's a game of trend hijacking. Okay, now some of you may already be familiar with this and may be asking, how long is this going to last? And that's a fair question. Staying relevant in internet culture is sort of like trying to stand still on a moving treadmill, and you have to run these days in order to keep up. But something I think Labubu does very well is not only keep up, but they mutate, and in a good way. Let's break it down. What we've seen is Labubu venture into animation, into pop-up installations, themed cafes, and even brand collabs. There was even a Labubu jazz vinyl. A jazz vinyl. And psychologically, that is brilliant because it spikes dopamine by creating freshness, something our brains naturally crave. Even more, Labubu delivers this in rapid, bite-sized chunks. Basically, it's become the equivalent of microtransactions in online gaming. So it keeps its fans not only in a cycle of consumption, but discovery. One other point I want to make here is that Labubu is one of those what we call recession indicators. Most of us may think of these sorts of things as people reducing their spending and gearing more towards practical things, which is true. But in fashion, what tends to happen is people gear more towards accessible little things that they can carry around with them and put on just about anything. This guy has a fun little key ring around. So, sorry, not a guy, I misspoke. She is meant to be carried around on a purse. So basically, this becomes a signal that is itself luxury in disguise as sort of playful indulgence. Labubu's rise wasn't magical, it's actually psychology in motion. And if you're a creator, an artist, or a brand builder, there's a lot to borrow from here, ethically speaking, of course. First, what we can learn is that they built a world, not just a product. Labubu's not just a toy, it's a character with lore, community, and emotional continuity. People aren't just buying it, they believe in it, they interact with it, they create their own adjacent experiences in that world. Which leads me to my second point, making the audience part of the creative process. From social media content to user-generated content, Labubu fans feel like co-creators. That shared ownership boosts engagement and loyalty. Third, engineers scarcity and novelty. Blind boxes, limited drops, and weird collabs, they're not just gimmicks, they're rituals. The surprise release model taps into our brain's love of novelty and our culture's obsession with exclusivity. And finally, commit to the bit. From the aesthetic and the tone to the universe, Labubu never breaks character. Even though they'll switch it up in the packaging, one drop will have a very minimalist tone, the next is very bright and colorful. The product and the world never loses sight of who it is. In a fragmented internet, consistency is rare, and rare is valuable. In the end, it's not just about what you create, it's about how you make people feel when they interact with it. Labubu makes people feel like they're part of something weird, creative, exclusive, and a little bit unhinged. And that's the sweet spot. If you enjoyed watching this video, I appreciate it very much. If you would drop a comment, a like, and subscribe to the channel. As always, I'm Dr. Charles. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you at the next check-in.